to Fiercely Eclectic, episode 7. I am Kersus on the Fiercely Eclectic Discord, and I am here with.
Phzoul.
We have some topics to talk about today. Let's see. You brought up a good one there beforehand. Might as well let's start with that. You talked about Black Swan.
Yeah. So a Black Swan event. So basically, this is as the GM adopting the idea that I'm going to introduce something into the game for my players that they've never experienced before. And there's all kinds of like entertainment or media that have done this. So, for example, one of the first ones that comes to mind is Game of Thrones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler: Ned Stark being executed at the beginning, the red wedding, right? So these are things that shocked the audience, and through that shock, it created greater immersion and greater, and just that they needed to keep consuming more. Uh, I created a list once of things that players don't get to do in RPGs. And I was just going through that list, and my goal was, well, I'm going to try and do that, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
uh, you're sitting at a game. If I can throw something in that you've never experienced before as a player, and it's kind of cool and interesting. Well, I mean, it just makes it that much more memorable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I remember that, but I think the first encounter we had, or at least one of the first games you were going to run, you were like, "Well, give me a list of things people want to do that they've
Yeah.
never done before," and that was the first time I'd heard anybody ever say that.
Did you have something
And
about playing a talking tank or something? Was that one of your responses?
it could have been Ogre, yeah, the sentient
Oh,
tank.
maybe it was. Maybe it was Ogre. Which we have to do that. I actually have the adventure half written. I have rules ready to go. Uh, yeah. So
Oh.
it's things like for example, I wrote down being in command of a capital starship, like a star destroyer, right? As
Oh.
one.
Mhm.
Like it's so it's things like I remember the Matrix game. I think it was Mike. Uh, and you had this encounter where these SUVs were chasing you, and he stopped and he stepped out, opened the hatchback, and he had a saw light, like a light machine gun, like a squad automatic weapon, 250
Mhm.
round drum, and his character turned around and he unloaded, and he actually said, "This is cool. I get to use a saw in an RPG." So that's kind
Mhm.
of the idea, right? It's kind of like you're doing something that that is atypical. It's not just another dungeon crawl. Now there's a place for comfort, right? I look at Dungeons and Dragons, like dungeon crawls and stuff, as as slipping into an old pair of slippers, right? It's not sure there could be some novelty, but everybody knows the stats in the monster manual. Everybody knows the spells. It's very comfortable. The idea here is to not make people uncomfortable, but to introduce something where they're like, "Wow, that's never happened before."
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember one of the options. I think one of the probably what led me to Ogre is one of the first options you mentioned was drive a tank or and there was other things,
that's
but
right.
always
Yeah,
drive the tank stuck
yeah,
out to me as a thing.
yeah.
I think I uh, I was the one who pushed you to run. I think you did you not run the Sidewinder, the one with the fighter jets?
No, I didn't run that yet, but we could do
Did
that.
you not?
Yep. No, I
But then
didn't.
someone
No,
else
not yet.
ran it. Mike Malone ran it.
Oh, did he? Huh.
I think he did. I don't know what rules he used. He might have used yours or he might have used Travel. I can't remember now, but he had some other rule set I think he found. And he did like a fighter pilot thing, and that was a lot of fun. But that's yeah. I think trying to fit in like the high speed, combat of thinking, oh, what would be cool is pulling up flying an Avro arrow.
Yeah. Classic.
My
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of the idea of it. And even if you are doing something, even if the genre or the game is familiar, even just asking yourself, is there anything that pick one scene or one encounter and say, is there anything that I could do to this that will make it unique? Something that I've never done before as a GM and something that the players they've never experienced before. I
What's
love that
something you've
idea. Like I mentioned. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask what's something you've always wanted to do as a player and not had a chance to do.
Oh, as a player. Yeah, that's interesting. The capitals. So the list that I created was a bit inspired by me. So capital ship was one. Um, I always wanted. It's funny. I've never done so in a medieval or a fantasy setting. I've never had a character who participated in a joust, like a
Oh,
cavalry,
really?
like a charge or a
A
joust.
cavalry
You know
charge?
how? So if I think about epic movies, you think about Braveheart or any of those epic movies. The moment that is the most impactful is when the two armies are charging together. How do you capture that type of moment in an RPG? Most RPG combat is very one-on-one, right? Or it's small groups. Um, so jousting is one-on-one. So I've never done jousting. I thought that would be cool. Um, and then kind of that massive, you're in the midst of chaos type thing. I thought that would be cool. Now I have GM that. I have never played it. Uh, however,
So yeah,
I got
I'd
one.
have to say the same. I've GM'd it. So Destiny of Kings has a joust or potential for you to have a joust in that across a bridge.
Oh, do they?
And
Yeah,
I've run that at least twice, and that's been a fun moment. And of course, I've played the old, you know, what is it, the original D&D jousting matrix or wherever that original jousting
yeah,
matrix came from. That was a lot of
yeah,
fun to play, and I've incorporated that into games with some slight modifications. So because there is
yeah,
a way of winning that all the time, so you have to modify
yeah,
it slightly. But I've
yeah.
never been a player in it. No.
No, and interestingly, it's funny that you asked me that question. I would say most of the genres which I write about or GM, I don't get to play in.
Well, we'll have to fix that. If there's something you wanted to do, I would definitely try and work something up. But the
Yeah.
capital ship, I find like I pushed that to my players once. Would you guys? I think I worded it wrong. Instead of, "Hey, do you guys want to try running a capital ship?" I said, "Hey, would you want to do this or a Firefly-like thing?" And immediately they all were like unanimously, "Let's
Oh,
do a Firefly-like adventure."
yeah,
So I
yeah.
kind of put myself in a bad position there because I didn't want to run the Firefly adventure. I wanted to run a capital ship, so I never got to try it. But Traveler has
Yeah,
this that like a whole series of adventures about you running a big ship or being members on the ship. In any
yeah.
case.
Well, in that Star Wars game, which I definitely we'll have to figure out a date to post that. Um, because you're playing Vader, Thrawn, it's that like Thrawn, the Thrawn character in that has on their character sheet the Chimera Star Destroyer, right? Is
Mm,
5,000 stormtroopers, uh, you know, 72 TIE fighters, the Star Destroyer. So again, that's equipment that the character can use, which I think is
hmm.
pretty cool. Thrawn's not necessarily going to be someone who's charging on the front lines himself, but he's going to wield his intellect and his resources, right? So that's a bit of a
Call
different,
down a strike.
yeah, it's a bit of a different play. Whereas Vader is going to be on the front lines, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
there's a battle. Oh, sorry.
when you talk about commanding a capital ship, you're thinking like one player is in charge and the other players do something else, not like a group of players, kind of like Star Trek, where you're kind of the main people on a big ship.
No, it could be either. My friend Barry, he has a game idea which he's kind of picking away at, and it's never um but we haven't played it yet. And the concept is that there are two planets that are at war, but it takes 100 years for ships to get between them. So war has been declared, and the fleet has left from both planets, and it's kind of a generational ship. And the idea is each player is in charge of a capital ship in the fleet, and then they collectively form the council. Kind of the command council that makes the decisions. I think he even put something interesting, whereas the ships are actually moving faster than communication. Yeah, Traveler is like that, right? Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
So they have to. So the whole scenario is these moral decisions based on limited information and not being able to communicate. And the key to it is that each fleet contains a planet killer, right? So basically, they have to make all these moral decisions. Then the climax of the game is when the two fleets pass, and the battle lasts one round because that's all there is. That's all the time, right? So essentially, it's
Yeah.
all the prep. It's the build up to that moment, and then they pass, and then it's kind of like, what's the outcome? I thought it was a cool idea. Yeah,
It that is a cool idea. It's a different scale and it's a different idea, but it reminds me of things like Star
that's right. Yeah,
Blazers or there's a few
yeah,
other. There's one of those like a puppet show, like a or a what that stop animation show that had like a something like that too. Uh, I don't remember it
yeah.
offhand.
All right,
Yeah,
novelty. Introduce that's one of the things I like to try and do. Introduce novelty and something different into the thing. I'm going to throw one out, and it's probably not something you can do in a lot of situations, but I have used it effectively. But it's a rarity in role playing games, and that is romance.
oh yeah.
So throwing out well every if you think about every movie the hero always has there's always Indiana Jones and Marion Ravenwood, um,
Hmm.
Han Solo, Princess Leia, but it's something that is underutilized in RPGs. And I understand, in a convention setting or whatever, people you don't know that might be, there's obviously cautions. Um, but I'm not talking R-rated stuff. I'm talking like PG-13, general or whatever, like Indiana Jones. Why can't you introduce something like that? Because yeah, so what I was saying is, yeah, romance can be an effective motivator in a game.
Right. Romance. Yeah. I think a lot of people, and I shouldn't be speaking for others, but I think I pull away from romance being center anymore just because I feel people might be uncomfortable. But
Well, that's where I
that's
go. Yeah, you obviously can't. You can do it though in a way that's not. Again, typically it's not. So I don't encourage like players and players. So it's always an
mm,
NPC. Like I said, it's always very light. And yeah, of course, it's not something that I necessarily do in not something I would necessarily do with a convention with strangers, but I have used it pretty effectively. Um, and some of my publications, some of the adventures that I publish, like The Thief of Eyes, which we haven't played, but romance is a romance between one of the players, and it would be just chosen. It's like one of those background things. Yeah, actually, the Company of Dagon, or sorry, the Covenant of Dagon, that adventure, and Thief of Eyes adventure, both of those romances at the center of the story, right?
hmm, I'll have to go back and read them. I can't remember if I've not read them because if I haven't played them or I do have the Dagon one
It's
though.
just yeah, and it's just simply as a motivator. It's not that there's
Mm,
romantic. It's not that there's romantic scenes. It's that the character. So the basic setup is it's basically it's a modern retelling of Shadow over Innsmouth, and the characters are going to Innsmouth because an
mm.
NPC has disappeared. So the romance angle is one of the background things is that NPC was in a relationship with the character. So it's that simple. So it doesn't have
Yeah.
to be
I,
doesn't
I
have
like
to
that.
it's
I
not
like that as a
yeah
motivator. Yeah.
yeah.
In my campaign, inadvertently, there's been romance. It's never on purpose on my side, and I don't think it's on purpose. Like, there's one player, his character keeps end up getting entangled in some kind of romantic, and he's like, "Why has this always happened to my character?" And I'm like, "I think it's because of stuff you do." Um, but we had
Funny.
one where it was kind of cute because there was kind of this kind of young, like the player was playing kind of a young man, and there was a young woman, and they ended up having this kind of playful childlike thing where like it was an NPC and a PC, but it was
Yeah,
very much
yeah,
like how 4-year-olds or 5-year-olds would think about dating.
yeah.
It
Oh
was, we
yeah,
sit next to each
yeah.
other, but we don't talk to each other at all, and that was our
Yeah,
romantic moment, and that was
that's
fun
funny.
for a little while. And I think what surprised me one time was I had this, beautiful woman appear who was clearly and unquestionably a demon. Like it was like had horns and like it was
Yeah.
100% a demon. And even didn't even try to hide the fact. But then like all the characters were like, "Well, let's impress this beautiful demon." And even the female one was the one that was the most forward. And so it was, I didn't expect that. I thought they'd want to kill it. So I thought I'd have to convince them that, this demon's got these things to offer them. And they
Yeah.
just jumped right in. And it was so like semi-romantic in that,
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yeah, for
impress
sure.
a beautiful person. Uh, but
Yeah.
yeah, it seems to come and go. And there was one kind of this funny scene between one of my players and their character and an NPC. And at one point, I was trying to pass information because it was an important NPC. It was like one of those like I don't know linchpin, but one of those cornerstone NPCs that kind of has a lot of information and the ability to really help the party. And we were having this back and forth, and he went, "Well, Dwight, when are we going to fade to black?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Well, the romantic thing. I don't want to go any further with that. And this is, you were flirting? I had no idea.
That's
Like,
funny.
I thought it was just an awkward conversation. So that's how good I am at doing romantic stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah. You mentioned something earlier which reminded me that I did play a Pendragon game once. I didn't get to joust, but when the game started and I introduced my character, the GM was like, "And who's your wife and kids?" And I was like, "What? Yeah. Well, you gotta introduce you're going to a feast. Your wife and kids are with you. How many kids do you have, and who is your wife?" And again, it was a very all of a sudden my perception of that character completely shifted. Right now,
Mm.
he's not just a warrior and a knight. He's a husband and a dad, and it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And I had to juggle that dynamic throughout the game.
I like that. Yeah, I've liked doing stuff like that once in a while. I think the first
Yeah,
time anybody did anything like that to me, I was like really taken aback, and I was like, I don't know what to say. I've been put in the spot here. But after a few times, and then you just start, well, it really does help your how you kind of see your character through the adventure.
yeah. I will say that so the GM, his name is Shannon. Uh, that first episode, that first session of Pendragon he did was brilliant. It was a feast, and we all showed up, and it was a tournament. Again, I didn't get to joust, but we did all show up with our families, and the whole first session was meeting the NPCs. And every time we met the NPC, like let's say I met oh this is Lord whatever, he would the GM would be like, Uh, you notice the scar on his hand. You remember when that happened 3 summers ago. What was and then it's what was that? And so the reason why it was brilliant is that all of the players met all of the NPCs, and by the end of the evening, by the end of that first session, we had this very rich history with all of them and personal, right? Because we had actually created those meaningful moments. And then session two was get on with the adventure, and it felt so immersive because every time someone came in, it's like, oh yeah, I went hunting with that NPC 4 summers ago, so it's just it was a brilliant way to immerse us into the world and with the NPCs in a single session.
I like that. Yeah, I'm taking notes on that. Because that is one of the things in a campaign. There's some struggle with, and I've told you before that I don't even try to tie anybody to the parties anymore. They just tend to float toward who they float
Yeah.
toward. But those kind of questions could help because we do early on in the campaign. I had a lot more player interaction in setting canon where they would often state things and I would just go, "Yep, that's it. Yep, that's it. That's now canon in the campaign." And had never even crossed my mind.
Uh, yeah.
Uh, or they might ask me a question, like, "Well, what color do pumpkins bleed?" And I just return it back to them. I don't know. What color do they bleed? And then so I actually have a list now because we go through it
Oh,
because there's
okay.
always somebody who asks. It's like, "Well, what color did the veil bats bleed?" I'm like, "Well, let's figure it out."
That's
And
funny.
sometimes in that case, I did a pile of research on the type of creatures they were, just like in real the reality of it, and then I made some kind of judgment calls. But sometimes I let them decide, and sometimes I do a pile of research. But now I've got a list of creatures and what, because it's not in the bestiary because the creator never thought of it, and so I have all the blood colors and types. Sometimes they like this creature's chlorophyll. This is like kind of like black dust or something that actually comes out, or
Hey,
stuff like that. Yeah.
sounds like a savage group.
Oh
Collecting
yeah,
blood
yeah. I mean,
samples. Yeah.
for, a lot of bleeding. There's a lot of getting covered because I'm definitely graphic with that stuff. Like if you're underneath a creature and you cut it open,
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, you're gonna be covered, and you're gonna have to deal with the
Yeah.
fact that now you're covered in the sticky crap. And then there's always a lot of vomiting in our party for some reason. So the one guy in the outpost, there's the Vidane cleaners, and they got to go take the robes to get cleaned and stuff because somebody's vomited on them.
That's funny.
You mentioned something earlier that I wanted to return back to, and the idea that in my mind I was thinking comfort food, but the comfortable old slippers and going back and playing like a dungeon crawl, and that interests me too because I find, of course, I did that for a long time before I started
Yeah.
trying new things, and now I've tried many new things and I enjoy trying new things, but sometimes it is nice to let's just do a standard, like no surprises dungeon crawl.
Yep. Yeah. Goblins, wolves, the enemy. It's kind of like started and end.
Yeah,
For sure. Yep. Yep.
gather at
Those
the end.
things. Yeah. Those things. Yeah. I mean, it's that, and that's how I view it. It's just kind of it's familiar, comfortable, and you don't have to. Doesn't take as much effort or energy. And even on the GMing side, I think we mentioned this before, or I mentioned this with I think with age. Um, Coming up with an adventure for fantasy takes me 15 minutes, right? Coming
Yeah.
up with an adventure for anything else is a lot more effort.
Yeah, I find it harder to do modern day adventures for sure.
Yeah,
I'm
because it's
getting
much
better
more
at the
complex.
sci-fi, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I think
funny.
one of the issues. Go
Traveler
ahead.
has been an interest. Oh, it's just saying, Traveler has been interesting. Those adventures have come are coming pretty easy now, but which has surprised me a bit.
Yeah, I guess that's the system I've chosen to try to write original stuff for that I hadn't done before. With fantasy, I usually use published stuff that I created as we went, I guess, but I never created like here's a one shot. But for Traveler, it's like feels like it's just perfect for one shots for me.
I often wonder what because in the monthly Traveler game, um, yeah, I wonder whether one. Sometimes I wonder whether one shots are more pro. Do GMs like them more, or do players like them more? I know my players don't like my regular group. Don't like one shots. As odd as that
Oh
sounds.
yeah.
Oh, they
Hmm.
don't. No, some of them will, but they don't like it because they're saying I'm investing in creating this character to only use them once. Um, that's I want to keep using them. So they'll do serial one shots, as in you can keep doing one shots where we're using the same characters, and I'm like, okay, I can do that, but and I get that, Although the greatest compliment, and I put this in why one shots are awesome. The greatest, I knew that I had succeeded when I had GM'd a one shot, and one of my regular players at the end sat back in his chair, let out a sigh, and said, "I can't believe I'll never play this character again." And I was like, "Yeah,
Oh wow.
of course." The bittersweetness
Yeah.
of it, right? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the throwaway aspect of the characters to some degree when I'm a player in a one shot. But I like to get into it. I still lean into the character, and I think I
Yeah.
lean into it more because I don't have to less worry. I don't have to. I might as well lean into whatever comes naturally in a one shot right away. Although I guess
Yeah.
I do that in campaigns now too. I'm just not in as
I
many campaigns.
I think it's my own fault that my players are like that, because right from a long time ago, we're doing this cast your character, put thought into, like, so I demand that they put thought into it, and it's no wonder that when they do, they're like, "Well, I don't want to do that," and then throw it away, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think probably with me in real life outside of Discord that we were really a matter of we always did one shots. We may have taken more than one session, but more often than not because we were young, we would take however many hours it took.
Yeah.
Like we didn't sit down for 4 hours. We sat down and then we stopped playing when the adventure was over.
That's right. You
Uh,
must have pulled a few all-nighters.
100%. We did Castle Amber in all one sitting. Like I
Yeah.
don't think you could do. I don't know. I could do Expedition to Barrier Peaks in one sitting, but definitely we did Castle Amber and some of those other classic
Mm.
adventures that we did. And of course, all the dungeon magazine adventures that we played.
Oh, yeah.
You do them in one sitting. And then some modern
Yeah.
stuff. We definitely, yeah, we were, yeah, to have that luxury, right? When you're a little younger and
Yeah.
you can just stay up all night and you're fine the next day. And the
Yeah.
advantage too is there was not a lot of heavy drinking. I found when there's heavy drinking involved, it was a lot harder to have a marathon session because once somebody got drunk, if they
Yeah.
can't read their
Yeah.
character sheet because they're too drunk,
Yeah.
made it difficult.
It's funny, that's something I've never blurred. I like, drinking and playing, I've never done that, because I don't know how you I don't like you said, I don't know from a GM perspective, I don't know how I could.
Oh, I
Um,
don't think I could
uh,
GM drunk.
no,
No, yeah.
no, no. Yet I know, like, one of my good friends that we used to game together, but we don't. He's in a separate group. I talk to him every day, but when they're gaming, they're all drunk by the end of it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
"I don't know how you do it," right?
It's different experience. I can
Yeah,
imagine. Remember, I was playing. I was going up to a weekend event up kind of like a little northern Ontario, not like far north, just a little bit north. And Greg Ellis, who's a RPG author, and he was hosting this weekend at a little camp, and you'd go there, and he after the first weekend, the second time we did it, he was like,
yeah.
"And no drinking until the games are done."
Oh,
Because the
nice.
first
Okay,
time
yeah,
there was no
yeah.
problems, but there was one or two
No,
people
no.
that
Yeah,
were getting drunk and
yeah,
they just weren't able to contribute at that point. And
yeah,
and I liked that, and I started doing that with my friends. I kind of said, let's no heavy drinking at least. You can have a
yeah,
beer, but nothing. Let's not like dive in and pull the whole case apart until we're done, and then
yeah.
we can just sit and talk after. Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
that's funny. Alright.
But what is it you think that makes like when we talk, maybe we're not talking about exactly the same thing with the comfort food or the
Yeah,
slippers, because to me it's kind of a standard almost random dungeon crawl, where you wouldn't need much prep. I wouldn't even need to devise a plot, just let's go through this dungeon.
yeah. Uh, is that what I'm thinking when I think about these
Yeah,
slippers?
yeah, what are
Yeah,
you
I
thinking of?
so not it so basically it's playing the tropes, I guess, of the genre, to some extent. Like, uh funny enough, I don't do dungeon crawls. I haven't done dungeon crawls in a long time. I'm a big believer in the 5-room dungeon or whatever. Um, like, I remember I GM'd, and it was actually an excellent, campaign by Wizards of the Coast. It's the latest Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen or something like that. It's the latest Dragonlance
Hmm.
one. Uh, I ran that whole book, but it has these dungeons in it, and I was like, so what I do is I read the dungeon, and I find the one encounter in the one room that is interesting, and that's it. Everything
Hmm.
else is just, yeah, you're passing through the ruins, to get to that encounter, because I'm a believer in momentum, and I'm not a believer in repetition. I remember reading in the book, I'm like, "Okay, room number 1, they fight some draconians. Da da da. Room number 3, they fight some draconians. Da da. Room number, oh, some more draconians." And I was like, I'd be pulling my hair out by the third fight with draconians,
Yeah,
right?
and there are some like that, yeah, that's I could totally see that. But
Yeah.
I
So
think on
you
my
reduce
side, I
things.
like the
Yeah,
tension of what's around the next corner, what's around the next corner, is this going to be important? And then
Yeah.
no one, this one wasn't, or this one wasn't. Oh, that just took out one of our NPCs with a trap. Oh, we got to be more
Yeah.
careful now.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. And I think the key for me would be um yeah, I guess it's just making sure that comfort doesn't equal boredom, right? Or doesn't become
Right.
stale. So it's a fine line. I want it to be comfortable, but I still want it to be exciting. But following the tropes. So you're not doing anything. I guess you're not doing anything that makes me as a player go, "Where did that come from?" Or that's unusual, or that's
Yeah.
odd. It can still be smart and it still have twists and things like that. But it's kind of like if you're going into, like, I keep mentioning Indiana Jones tonight, but if there's another Indiana Jones movie that comes out, you know what you're going into, right?
I guess.
At
Yeah.
least hopefully.
That's a whole nother a whole nother
Yeah,
subject
yeah,
matter.
yeah.
But for the first three, yes.
Yes, the first three, yeah. Yeah.
So I was actually talking to my wife about dungeons because I finally took my dungeon robber. It's a big, huge map thing, a poster, basically a poster, and then I put it in a frame today or yesterday, and I haven't put it
Oh,
on the wall yet, but now I have it set so it's easier to use. And I've been like, and so she was asking me about, about drawing dungeons, and so I said, for the most part, you'd have your one graph page, and the whole dungeon would fit on that one page, so
yeah,
it would
that's right,
always
yeah,
fit. And
yeah.
when I was young, maybe I screwed around with the 45-degree angle passageways, but as I gotten older, I try to keep everything 90 degree and and
Yeah, yeah.
whatnot. Unless there's a purposeful labyrinth, I don't like to complicate the mapping too much myself. But a lot of those old dungeons were always trying to get you lost.
Yeah, that's true, and mapping was a big, I mean, the GM description and you be trying to draw your map as a player in the early days.
And I didn't experience that until we were older because when I grew up playing, the GM always drew the map on graph paper, and we used push pins, or bulldog pins is what we called
Oh,
them,
yeah.
the colored ones, and we put them in styrofoam. And so he would always extend the map as we
Ah,
played.
that's cool.
And it was a big change the first time I ran into players. I didn't until I was an adult. I probably never ran into players mapping,
Yeah.
and I loved it. I absolutely loved it as a GM because it took a lot. Because drawing that stupid thing out takes time, right?
It does, yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so one of the things we talked about last time I wanted to expand on is treasure. It was mentioned in our last episode,
yep.
and that idea that money meant nothing and you need treasure to be important. How do you keep your treasure useful in your adventures, whether regardless of the genre, although it seems to appeal mostly to fantasy. But I think, the items you can pick up, like in Traveler, you'd have items of the ancients that would be really, really special. But how do you keep treasure interesting?
So treasure is only interesting if it uh, can be used for something interesting. Like
Mhm.
just the accumulation of it. I don't even. We in fact our group, like when we're running some of those, like if I think about Shadow of the Dragon Queen, if I think about the Tomb of the Lizard King, which I rewrote and ran, treasure outside of magic items, treasure didn't matter. Like the gold, silver, you might mention there's some, but it just didn't come into
Mhm.
play because there's really nothing to spend it on. Uh, but one of the things, so for example, one of the things that I like that Vassen does well, or I think is a nifty concept, is the headquarters, right? Uh, so they have a home base, and you can spend on upgrading it, right? Oh, we now have a library. Oh, we now have a medical room. I like that. So if I was going to actually say treasure matters, then there will be upgrades like that the characters could do, things that they could save and invest in that would make it easier in the future. Oh, so we now have an apothecary, and we can now get a free potion of healing each at the beginning of each adventure. So it's kind of like, are you saving up for something, right? Because again, if you don't have a goal in mind, then I don't see the point. If you don't have something to spend it
So
on.
if you, with that home base situation, would the home base then have plot armor? Like, could someone like NPCs come in and like assault the base?
For sure. Yeah, 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 you could do that. And then they'd have to pay to repair it. Uh, so for example, in one of the games that I ran, one of the characters inherited a castle the first adventure, and they were like, "What?" I'm like, "Yep, a castle," and it came with 250,000 gold in debt. And so,
Yeah,
so that character now all of a sudden treasure mat like that character was constantly trying to get out from under the debt. Um, and so now all of a sudden, treasure had no meaning before. Now it has meaning, right? They're trying
interesting.
to
Yeah,
to get that goal.
and
Like it's funny in the old days, it had meaning because one gold piece equaled an experience point, right? So,
if you
but
use that rule,
if you did, yeah, we did
but it's
early
interesting.
on. It was abandoned. Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting like you say that like having the debt because I think that's the idea of starting travelers, often starting with like a ship share or something and having debt,
yeah.
and then of course keeping the ship. Part of the reason you adventure is to pay for the adventure, right? You're always
That's
trying
right. Yeah,
to.
like if you were doing fire, like if I was running a Firefly adventure, that would be a core component. All right, we're just scraping by, but you have to kind of, yeah. I mean that has to be whatever you're doing in terms of the treasure you dole out and stuff like that, and you got to be managing that. What am I giving? What am I taking? Um, and is it actually playing a role in the story?
So one of the things I toyed with in my Faraway Land, the Heroes of Hallow campaign, is the idea that magic, and I think we mentioned this before. So, but moving this towards items, that magic forms based on what the user thinks magic should do. And so when they get a magical, instead, because one of the things I found, oh, you get this like flaming mace that has a crown on it and it's got these powers and you got to slowly figure out what all the powers do and stuff. But the person doesn't really like maces, and so they still pull out their light
Oh
sword,
yeah,
or
yeah,
they have a pole arm that's not magical, but that's actually their favorite weapon. So they'd rather use the pole arm. So the idea
yeah.
of, imbuing the magic into the pole arm within the verisimilitude of the game appeals to me, to allow them to like, oh, you've acquired this kind of stockpile of magic and as treasure, and now you can infuse it into
Oh
something
yeah,
that
that's
you
interesting.
already
Yep.
like, so you have an attachment. So I toy with that. I've been toying with that idea, and I've definitely used the idea where I ask a number of questions when they acquire a magical item, and then I form the powers of that item around how they answered.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
then they've got to figure it out too, so it's not like clear. And then they tend to role play it in such a way that while the player kind of knows how it works, the character, they feel like their character doesn't fully understand it, and so they
Yeah.
still role play it.
So here's a question. So it um, sounds like you're kind of addressing this indirectly, but I guess when you're picking magic items to put in the game, at the time that you're deciding, are you thinking about who the players are, or is it purely kind of random? Because we've all been there where the wizard ends up with a magic two-handed sword, and they're like, "Great, thanks."
I think, well, and yeah, and getting away from the like a system where you're limited in your weapons for your character makes a big difference.
You're
I
right.
think I
Yeah.
used to do that, and I think I don't as much anymore. I think the magic items are just the magic items, and because again, like I've said in a previous episode, with the if I try to foist an NPC that I think is very useful onto the party, because I think they'll like them, they never like them, and it's same
Mm.
with a magic item. I think if I make a magic item just for a character, that's not the character that ends up getting it. Like someone else will actually want it or something, and I don't like
Yeah.
to control that, so I try not to do that. However, in game, there might be, for example, a demoness who has come down and said, "I
Yeah.
promise you a magical item of this thing you've been dreaming of, a magical pole arm that can do earthquake powers and all these things you've wanted. If you just come to where I am and do this thing for me." It's
Yeah.
clearly a trap, but maybe the treasure's real, and that I
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
do.
That makes
Uh,
sense. Yeah. That's
and
cool.
I've also started. I don't know when it started, but there's a balance. So a lot of my powerful artifacts have a cost. So you
Yep,
got to
I
weigh
like
that.
that.
And that in the old days you would have just called it a cursed item, and now for me it's really just a bit of balance. Like every time you use it, something this bad thing happens. So you got to sort of weigh it. And
Yep.
sometimes it's a lie, right? So for example, you might have a magical item, and I can't give too many spoilers, but you might have a magical item that makes it appear like something's happening to you, but nothing actually is. So it's almost
Yeah.
an illusion.
Yeah.
And so you think you're cursed, but it's really the curse itself is an illusion, and the item has lots of power, and you could use it willy nilly. But what keeps you from using it is this appearance of a curse, and that's interesting too.
Yeah. Yeah. That is
Yeah.
cool. I like that idea. Yeah.
So we were also going to talk about. Oh, I wanted to ask you a question.
Yep.
Have you ever done time travel in your games?
Yes. I have. Uh, it's challenging because, of course, you. Eh, I actually ran a game where it was actually a Battlestar Galactica. It was a Battlestar Galactica campaign, and I had um, it was the Battlestar Prometheus. So the characters, there was another survivor of the Cylon War. They're on the Battlestar Prometheus, and they discovered a Battlestar that had been lost long before the war. They discovered it in space, and it was kind of phasing in and out. And so when they boarded, I actually did a loop that I tried to basically their actions. Every time the ship kind of phased out and in, it reset time. So I was trying to um, remember everything that they did and then try to use that on the next loop. But it's challenging. It is.
Hmm.
Yeah. What about
I,
yourself?
well, I mean, Svalbard. You played
Oh
in
yeah,
that,
Svalbard. That's right. Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. That's actually so that's a little bit different. Um,
mhm.
and I think that's an easier. Whereas you're just resetting and you get to start over again. What I was trying to do is have their things that they did in one loop affect things in the next, which was challenging.
So there is one that I'm trying to work out. Or at least I've kind of put the skeleton idea of an idea in for an adventure where it you go in and you have this adventure, and then
Yeah,
you're gonna have to go in like with some other group. Something like a secondary group goes in,
yeah.
and they actually have gone in before. Like so, even
Oh,
something
okay.
that's
Yeah,
done later actually happens. I don't know if that explains it very well, but the idea that the second group going in
yeah,
actually you like this first group has already met them and dealt with them.
yeah,
But now,
yeah,
so you have to loop it around. So you have to make sure the rationale is, oh, or even the same group, like same players. Oh, we see each other. Like if it was the same
yeah,
duplicates, why
yeah,
are we seeing duplicates? Well, it's because they've gone through time, but
mm,
they've already been there and done all this.
yeah,
And making the rationale for that is hard because you got to
yeah,
make sure they're they have to do this now, and not because they have to
yeah,
do it, but because they know this is the thing to do in order to save everybody or whatever.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm
Probably the
interested in
most.
time loops.
It is. Yeah, it's interesting. I'll tell you the most successful one that I did was in a vampire game. Um, and it
Mm,
wasn't sort of time travel. Well, so basically the setup was I was a player and a mage was introduced. He was an archmage, was introduced into one of the adventures. And the other players really treated this NPC disrespectfully. And the GM let them. GM's a nice guy. So he let them treat so I got so annoyed that after the game, I said, "I want to run the next session. Can I guest GM?" And he was like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah. I don't want to tell you what I want to do, but I want to guest GM." And he said, "Okay." So at the beginning of that adventure, I reintroduced the mage, and he came back and he said, "Listen, we got off on the wrong foot. Let's just shake on it." So they all shook. And then over the next 3 hours, I systematically destroyed his entire campaign. Like they couldn't believe it. Um, and yeah, about the 3 hour mark, at 1 hour left, um, they just literally couldn't believe what was happening. And then when they all died, when they all died, um, it snapped back to the handshake, and the mage let go, and he said, I've just given you a glimpse of your future. I pray that you can, it's up to you whether you can change it. And then we started the adventure over again with the knowledge, and they had all the knowledge that they had of the doomed ending, and they managed to turn it around. Right. So that was fun.
I like it. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I do like that. That's cool. I've always, and we've talked about it on this server some time ago, but it was hard to find the people, and maybe we're in a better position now. But I've always liked the idea of having, say, a monthly game with rotating GMs. That's one campaign that,
Oh yeah.
where
Yeah.
you can shift, you can be a player, and
Yeah.
kind of just rotate through the same campaign, do whatever you want, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I did it
yeah.
once, and again, I can't quite remember. I don't know if we went through it in its entirety, but it's an interesting idea. So myself and one of the other GMs, this will be way back, uh, we decided we would do a campaign and shift back and forth between us every week. So he'd do one week, I'd do the next, and we were not allowed to share notes.
Mm, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Hmm. We'll probably have time to touch on. We were talking about Lord of the Rings and epic and gritty and high fantasy, and we were talking at the end of last episode about the different types of fantasy. Uh, and there are, I think, quite a few when you break it down, right?
Oh, geez. Yeah.
And
Yeah. So many.
the first one that always comes to mind when I'm trying to break them up is, of course, sword and sandal,
Yep.
or some
Yep.
might say
Yep.
sword and
Yep.
sand, and
Yeah,
that's
I've
interesting.
never played in a game set in Hyperborea or Conan's world. That would be fun. Yeah.
And then Sword and Planet. But you mentioned
Is it-
Conan, and I think when we were gaming, our games were probably like in the 80s and 90s, were probably always a mix of Conan and Lord of the Rings somehow mashed together. So
Yeah.
like gritty, like
Yeah.
uh, chaos god like or horrible magic of Conan, but yet mixed with this, the bright light elf magic and stuff of Lord of the Rings and such.
You
Yeah.
mentioned Sword and Planet. Is that like John Carter of Mars, that type of stuff?
Yeah, exactly that
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's cool. I've never played that either. I
I
played
don't know
Dune.
that. Yeah, same.
Yeah. I've played I played in a Dune campaign, and I have to say it was quite enjoyable. We each had two characters. One. Uh, Yeah, it was actually fun. We were a fan. We formed a house, so we were all members of the same house, family members.
Mm.
So it was I enjoyed that because it had a little bit of the elements. So the new Dune RPG, it had a little bit of the elements where your character is doing stuff, but you can also send, because we were nobles, we had our house. We would also, I might be like, I'm going to send 6 assassins over to kill this NPC, and so my character's not actually involved, but I'm going to be making a roll on how well my character organized the hit. Um, how well do their people carry it out, type thing. Yeah, that is kind of like, so. I guess Sword and Planet is appealing. Yeah,
Yeah. I've only played in a Dune one shot. Andy Random ran it, and that was a lot of fun. I'm not sure that I bought into. I think that's Modifius that makes that role playing game.
it
Is that
is.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I'm
yeah,
not sure I bought into their system at that point. I think I need to try it again. But I liked playing.
yeah.
Like
I
he's a
don't.
good GM, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we made it work, but the system, in my mind, didn't matter.
Yeah.
Like it didn't do anything. It didn't do anything unique. Right?
And it shouldn't.
No.
But uh, I probably told you before. I did a fantasy campaign once, and every session we shifted systems.
Oh,
Just and
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't take notes or anything because I just thought I'd remember. And at the time I did. For years I remembered
Yeah.
like what
Yeah.
worked. So what we found, we even had the same character. So I, as a GM, between every session, I would convert every character, and then I'd run the next adventure with a completely different system. And it was at the time easy to spot the systems that were really limiting. Of course, D&D being a very limiting
Yeah.
system in general. And the
Yeah.
skill-based systems being a lot easier to convert into. But if you started with a skill-based system, it was really hard to go back to
Oh,
a D20 style system. But
yeah, for
we
sure.
started, I think, with like a. Did we start with like a Holmes? I can't even remember. I think we started with Holmes, and then we tried different systems all the way through, and it was very intriguing from my point of view. I think the players just enjoyed playing the game. I don't think they cared,
Yeah.
but I think there was definitely the once or twice where yeah, that system felt more limited. It felt like the mechanics got in the way, and the mechanics were more important than the adventure. And then most of the there's some of the sessions at least where like, oh, I didn't even notice the mechanics. They didn't matter. They were in the
Oh, cool.
background.
Yeah. 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 I, back to kind of the types of fantasy. I think my natural instinct is to be very narrow on the types of fantasy that I play, but I have learned that a good GM and a good story can make any setting memorable and enjoyable, right? So
Yeah,
I tend to be more classic, like Lord of the Rings, Conan. I would expand that now. I guess Sandal and Planet, but I tend not to like I guess Warhammer fantasy. People are riding
mm,
tigers and having I guess
yeah.
the super high fantasy stuff.
I never got into Warhammer.
Not Warhammer, sorry. Warhammer is gritty. I like Warhammer. What am I? World of Warcraft. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, Warcraft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so World of Warcraft. I'm not necessarily into that type of fantasy. But
Hmm.
like I said, I one of the GMs, and I know people will love Warforges probably. But one of the GMs said they wanted to run Eberron, and I was like, no way. I am not playing a game where there are steampunk or Warforges. I'll play steampunk, but I don't want to play steampunk fantasy. And he's like, give it a try. And I said, yep, I'll give it a try. And again, one of my
Yeah, I haven't
one of
I
my
haven't
favorite
tried it.
experiences.
Steampunk is one of the ones I don't understand, and I'd have to try it, and I'd be fully willing to try it, but it's not something I'm willing to invest on my side as a GM side in because
Yeah,
I think I don't
same
get
here.
it. I don't get the appeal.
And I think that's the big difference. What are you willing to GM versus what you're willing to play? I'm willing to play pretty
Well,
much anything. When it comes
same.
to a GM, that's where I'm more selective. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. But we
yeah,
just maybe we'll kind of try to tie up. But one of the things I wanted to mention, because we're talking a lot about adventures, and we've talked a lot about writing adventures, and you write very concise adventure from my point of view, concise adventures that kind of enrapture you as a player, like get you involved in the immersion. And you were talking about being narrow. Like I have a very narrow kind of with fantasy
yeah,
anyway. I don't know if that works for your other genres, but one thing I found, and it started with me writing an adventure that I thought was levelless. So I ran it for third level characters in D&D. This originally was for first edition D&D, and then I ran it for first level characters. Then I ran it for seventh level characters,
mm.
and then I switched it to legendary adventure. And then I tried it with different systems, and I'm gonna run it with faraway land soon. It's all ready to
Oh,
go. I'm
cool.
just waiting. I need at least 3 to 4 sessions to run it. But it made me think about how you can do things very kind of with this open scope, so that things don't, like the power of the characters don't matter as much as, and there's certain
Mm.
things you change. So like the guards are orcs, or are they hobgoblins, or are they, you just by 1 or 2 minor changes you could change, how difficult kind of the general
Yeah,
part of the
I
adventure
I kind
was.
of feel like Dragon Bane is a bit like that. Like you don't have that endless. Like it's not like D&D where every level you're gaining 10 hit points or whatever. At Dragon Bane, your hit points are kind of static, aren't they? They don't
I
really
don't
change.
know. I think I've played
Yeah,
it. I guess I've played it twice because you ran it for Lord of the Rings and I did
yeah.
the tournament.
No,
And I,
they
I think I
so they don't.
still am feeling Dragonbane out.
Yeah, there are things that you can do to increase your hit points, but it's not common. So It's to some extent
But
on Dragobane, the hit points that you're created with, that's what you're kind of stuck with.
But
Um,
I'm not talking about like I agree with you, and I'm not but I'm not talking about a system like faraway lands like that where hit points go up very minutely
oh,
throughout
okay.
your
Yeah,
career. But
yeah,
what I'm saying
yeah.
is the adventure itself, even if you have 5 hit points or if you have 40 hit points,
Oh, it's the same challenge.
it's the
Okay.
same
Yeah, I see what
challenge.
you mean. Yeah,
You might have
yeah,
to go about things slightly differently at first level
yeah,
to be more
yeah,
careful. You might have to flee an encounter or two because they
yeah,
didn't massively change things. So I still had like Sons of Kies or however you pronounce
yeah,
those monsters
yeah,
were
yeah,
in the first level adventure, but they fled them, and that because there was
yeah,
no way, like, and it was clear this was too dangerous, but there was a way out. And there was a way out for the high level characters, but they were more interested in wiping them out.
yeah, yeah.
So what
Yeah,
that
I
took
can
me
see
to
that.
is making genreless adventures, so where I can
Mm.
make an adventure that I can make and play it in Traveler, run it in Fantasy, run it in
Oh, interesting.
Horror.
Mm.
Horror is a little more difficult, but at
Yeah,
least you can try. You could run Sword and Planet just because you're taking the gist of the adventure and just plugging it in. That's
yeah,
my
of
thought
course.
anyway, and that's
Yeah, I've
I
never
think
tried it,
most
but
of my
I
adventures are
like
like
the
that.
idea. Yeah,
And
I
when you
like the
ran that
idea.
John Wick adventure, I felt like that would make a great fantasy adventure too.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never tried that. That's a cool idea. I'll have to take some of my adventures and go, what if this was in another genre and see how it
Mm.
worked? I mean, you could do it. I mean, sci-fi, making it sci-fi would be pretty easy. Um, yeah, I think that, yeah, I like that idea.
Well, you could totally turn that particular John Wick adventure into like a Fifth Element type adventure. That would fit right along with it.
Oh, yeah, easy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that would work. Um, maybe doing, yeah, maybe switching it to John. Yeah, I mean, John Wick in a sword sorcery age. Sure. I mean, sure. I mean, I think, yeah, I like that idea. It's not something I thought of, taking something and changing it. Typically, once I have an idea in a particular genre, that's where I get stuck. But you don't have to be. All of a sudden, your library adventures, you just increase them.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I like
But
that.
then you'd also have to want to run the same adventure more than once. But you might find the adventure very different, even though you really haven't changed, fundamentally haven't changed the adventure.
Yeah. It's
I don't know.
interesting the difference between published adventure if you are publishing versus running. And and so I find that if I'm just running a game and I'm not writing it, it's going to be much more free form and less linear. Uh, it's the challenge with writing an adventure is the player and the character are absent from the process. They don't exist, right?
That's
Um,
right. That
and
that's
it's
that's
such
worth a
a
whole session on its own.
yeah, yeah. It's so different because when the players are there, the story can be dynamic. When they're not there, you as the GM, it's linear, more linear, just because you're not getting any feedback. You're not getting any other input other than your own imagination, and it's challenging. It's a constant challenge when you're writing.
I I mean, I guess I would try playtesting, but the
You play test, and that yeah, so this happens. You play test, and it goes in another direction, and you're like, do I stick with my original writing, or do I now rewrite it to try and go in the direction that the playtest went? But then the next playtest, it could go somewhere else. You're never
Mhm.
as a writer, you're never going to be like, what I wrote is exactly what's going to happen. I think you just but
No,
what I've tried to do is not make it so strict that if it doesn't happen the way you wrote it, the adventure goes off the rails, right?
and that's important. But I think one of my complaints um, about some adventures that I've read is that if the author doesn't include his intent or her intent
Yeah.
or their intent, if they don't include the intent, for me as a reader that wants to GM it, I don't like when somebody throws me a curveball. I'm like, well, I don't even know what you meant by this thing happening, and so now I'm in
Yeah.
trouble. And you wing it as a GM, but there's some like I find I've played an adventure with a GM and then I've read the module afterward and I could run it no problem. But with some modules they pick up from the same author and I'd look at it and go, there's not enough specifics in here for me to understand what you're going for. And anybody can make a skeleton of idea. And so like the idea of being really freeform is great in play, but when you're publishing an adventure, I think the intent is important. If you put
Yeah.
across the intent, and I know I've heard some authors tell me things like, well, I don't want to shoehorn a GM into my vision. And I'm like, but I need to understand your vision so I can change it to my vision. If I don't understand what you're
Right.
trying to
Yeah.
do, I don't know what to change it to. That's my thoughts, my 20 cents.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think that goes down. I think that extends down to um, not just the overall author's intent, but even like if there's a main villain, clearly understanding their intent, right? So that you can be dynamic with that NPC or that villain. What's their goal in this game? What are they
Exactly.
trying
Yeah.
to accomplish? And yeah, so I'm constantly fighting that battle between it being too structured and trying to make it less structured, but also it has to have some structure because um, because you have to write it through, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place for us to end,
Okay.
unless there's some
Awesome.
last things you want to
Nope.
say. All
No, I
right.
think
Well,
that's good.
this is our 7th episode. This has been Cursus, aka Dwight, and
And Phzoul.
awesome.
That was the show.